All right, let's kill some time.
Let me ask you, did you get the screening? Did you watch the screener at 11 o'clock last night when it finally came through? Wow. So you stayed up till almost 1 a.m. watching Halloween Kills.
At least I didn't have any travel time.
That's a good point. However, I want to point out, initially, and this isn't telling stories out of school because the movie's already out, but we got an invitation to see this movie at an in-person screening this week or via screener link. Yeah. So, we opted for, as we often do, the path of least resistance. Now, we were supposed to get this link the same night it screened for critics. And at the 0 hour, almost literally, there was an email saying, actually, it's going to be a bit of a delay for the screening link. And I think the time bounced around a couple of times. And eventually it was, okay, you'll get it Thursday at 11 p.m. Central. We are Midwesterners. And, usually it's a bad sign when they have like the Thursday night, screening for critics, like that shows the studio isn't confident in the movie. But I mean, our mutual friend, Mark, the movie man Krawcheck, posted a picture of him standing outside the movie theater in his hometown in Wisconsin, about to go see Halloween Kills 3 hours before we even got the link to see this movie.
Yep. Yeah. And not just that we're Midwesterners, we're also, as you might have gathered, not teenagers.
No.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, sure. I figured it was an easier chance of me already being awake, watching it at 11, than getting up at 4:30, whatever, and watching it before I start work in the morning. That being said, the link was horrible.
We had problems with it?
Oh yeah, it would stop and start. It said I timed out. Like, how did I time out when I just put it on? Like, so what I did is I just scratched it, just screwed it and threw it away, and went Peacock.
Oh, okay. So you just watched it on Peacock. Awesome.
It's ridiculous. It's like, okay.
I didn't have any trouble with the link that when I watched it, but I watched it this morning. I got up, early, but I feel like the movie itself was trying to do you a favor by, the stops and starts. Like, are you sure you want to do this? Just go to bed. You don't need to watch Halloween Kills. Folks, you can probably tell, and I'm speaking on behalf of myself here, I can only guess at David's reaction. We're not fans of this movie, but we're going to talk about it.
I'm not a huge fan. I think that there's some good themes and ideas, but I wish they were executed literally. I wish they were executed a lot smarter. And it could have been. So
yeah, and I think some of that, I agree. I like this marginally better than I like the 2018 version, because I hated that movie. But the only reason I like it is because it still has that mean-spirited nastiness of the kills, which people say, it's Michael Myers, what more do you want? I mean, I think there's a difference, when you're showing an elderly couple getting butchered and you're focusing on, an old man gasping and gurgling and his wife who's just been shoved the light into her neck, and she's sitting there watching her husband get repeatedly stabbed by every knife in the butcher block. And that's not fun for me.
And I think in his old age, Michael Myers has turned into like an installation artist.
He's the Banksy of serial killers.
Yes. Yeah. Because I mean, if that's his thing, is killing. So he's turned it into his own kind of amusing art form. Amusing to him, apparently.
And but that's one of the many problems with this movie is they went back to the 1978 movie, and David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, and there was someone else, I think his name was Teams, his last name. They wrote these movies, and they're ignoring everything after John Carpenter's original film, which I understand. But in terms of selling what happens to this town of Haddonfield, Illinois, by the way, that's where we're at. It makes us look terrible.
Well,
we don't live in Haddonfield, but sure.
State.
Yeah. But the problem is, and this is something I think we talked about last time in 2018, the Michael Myers mythos has been built up over decades in terms of the movies because there've been so many damn sequels. He's killed like hundreds of people. But if you're just looking at Halloween 1, he killed 3 people. And like the town is like, no one ever got over it, and it's this big legend. And so he essentially killed 3 people on this rampage of Halloween night, 40 years ago, and no one in town has ever gotten over it. But everybody treats Michael Myers as if he's the same Michael Myers who's been through 6 or 8 or 10 Halloween sequels and remakes. It just seems a little bit disproportionate, the mania that these people go to. There's like a survivors, gathering on Halloween night at a bar that Anthony Michael Hall, who's now playing Tommy Doyle, the young kid that Jamie Lee Curtis's character was babysitting in the first
Paul
one.
Rudd was busy, I guess.
As was, I guess, the original actor who played him in 1978, but whatever. But there's like, here's to the survivors and the victims. I'm like, yes, all 3 people. And the one kid, Lonnie, who was the bully of that character in the 1978 movie, these kids were all like 10 years old or whatever. He and Tommy are now friends, and Lonnie has this big survivor story about he faced down Michael Myers. He was running. He was trying to get home from, because people are like, there's a killer on the loose. So he's running home. He trips on a dark street. He looks up. Michael Myers is walking towards him, and he stands over him for a second. Then he disappears, and it's just like cops leaning over him. Like, yeah, big hero.
I kind of like that approach because, and there are things that I like about this movie, like the whole survivor's guilt, or the whole idea of grief, and then the way stories are passed on. The way adults are sharing their grief from childhood to others, also publicly and also inebriated. So the truth is somewhere not there. And I kind of like that because this is I'm sure that happens in life, and I'm sure that there's a lot of, I don't know, authenticity there to an extent. And look, we're not looking for authenticity in characterization in these movies, but I guess what I'm saying is there was a potential here to really delve into these things, these themes. And that's what I mean when I said I just wish it was dealt with a little smarter.
I agree with you, but I think if you look at Andy Muschietti It chapters 1 and 2, I think those movies dealt with the same kind of a theme much better. Young kids in a small town get terrorized by this supernatural creature, and then they all grow up, but they've left the town. I can understand if you're gonna have it where everybody is just conveniently still hanging around and they're obsessed with this mythos, then address that head on, talk about it. Have someone come around and say, seriously, some random dude like cut up some people that you barely even knew 40 years ago. What's the deal? If there's an answer to that or a story to be told, that's fine. But they tie all of that into this mythologizing of Michael Myers anyway, this out of left field nonsense that they dropped into the later sequels of the original Halloween series, where he was like raised by a cult and like harnessed the power of evil, so he was unstoppable. There's some of that in here. Like at the very end of the movie, Laurie Strode, who's in the hospital for the entire film and just like in bed and recovering, she all of a sudden gets up and she's like, the more Michael Myers kills, the stronger he becomes. Like, how do you know any of this? I mean, it was hard enough to believe that a 60-year-old man was out there like stalking and slashing and messing people up like that in the last movie. But here, I don't go right to the supernatural from there.
And especially if they want us to believe that, if they want us to forget all the other movies before the last movie that they did. So, it's one of those legacy sequels, right? So they want us to go from John Carpenter's all the way to 2018's?
Yeah.
Was the last one? Yeah, 2018's Halloween, and then go from there. Well, okay, but at least let the movie and the characters do that too. Because like you said, there's no reason for, Laurie Strode to believe, the more he kills, the stronger he gets. Because as far as she knows, since the last movie, she hadn't seen him since 78. And all that time, she was preparing to go all Sarah Connor on it. Fine. They did a horrible job showing that anyway in the last film, but then with this one, yeah, I as much I would have liked to kind of do a study on, as much as you prepare for, a confrontation, for the end of times or whatever, there's still an element that you're not quite prepared for. And I think that would have been really cool, even with this mob mentality that develops in this movie, to study, to develop, and say, like, look, we can prepare all we want, but there's so many other variables that we're not prepared for. But this movie just deals with a lot of stupidity on the parts of the adults.
Yes.
It's not just teenager stupidity anymore in these horror slasher movies. It's the adults.
That's another point that I think one of the reasons these movies don't connect with me is those original slashers, they were about like teenagers and 20 somethings running afoul of this, thing. This, this isn't exactly ageism, but I could buy, like, if Tommy Doyle was, 25 or something, he's like the hothead, like, yeah, we're going to go get this guy, but he's like 50 years old. And again, it goes back to maybe just really has nothing else going on in his life. But the fact that he's able to rile up all of this support in the town, and there's nobody who says, hell, I'm just going to go in my house, call the police. This is going to end badly. There's no counter to it. It's all very like one dimensional.
He almost reminded, I mean, I like what Anthony Michael Hall was doing. I wish he just had better material. He almost reminded me of Patton Oswalt in Young Adult. I don't know why. I just thought of that, but it was just like, this guy who, just hung out around this town forever and never really left. But like, what is so special about Tommy Doyle that he's able to lead this mob mentality? It's not like he was a star quarterback at any point or anything. It's like, we don't know, it's like.
Well, and that's, one of the other issues with this thing is they're trying to bring all the callbacks to the original 78 film, including, I don't know if it was a CGI guy or just a lookalike or whatever, but they brought back Dr. Loomis.
Yeah, crazy.
And then they brought back, the bully Lonnie, the girl that Annie Brackett was babysitting, Lindsay, and the nurse from the hospital that got, the famous scene where he grabbed her through the car.
Right.
Like, and then Charlie Cypher's playing, Sheriff Brackett or whatever. They bring all of them back, but it seems like it's just to watch them,
get slaughtered.
Yeah.
I just see, that's the thing, is like, I don't understand why more of these, like, you're hanging out. I can understand hanging out in a tavern or coffee house or whatever to commemorate this, but then to say we need to group up and go after him, I have a hard time believing these traumatized adults would then, especially like, let's grab a baseball bat and go attack him, would then gather together and say, let's go after him, especially the nurse, especially Lindsay. Come on, maybe Tommy Doyle's all roided up and everything or whatever. And he's just, got a hard on to get after Michael, fine. But, that it was really just weird to see all of them kind of just follow suit like lemmings. I can understand a herd mentality and sheep, as Lori calls them in the hospital, but especially those two, Lindsay and the nurse. I would have liked to like a little bit more time with them and just, some characterization that says, hey, I'm not on board with this. I can't do this. I can't do this. I've been running away from this. I've been haunted by this my whole life. I can't do this. And then the poor nurse winds up like dying the way she almost originally died in the 78 version. Come on, that's not homage. That's cruelty. It's like, what the heck?
It is. I mean, it just felt like a very scripted, like, oh, okay, that's what they're
call
doing.
Back.
Yeah. But you bring up a great point. Especially if these people are so haunted by the memory of Michael Myers, it's unclear whether or not they believe he's the actual boogeyman or if he's just an escaped lunatic. But I would think twice about, let alone getting into a mob situation, but going out and trying to kill someone. I mean, that's I kept getting like these weird flashbacks to the origin of Freddy Krueger, where it was like the mob, trying to trace down the town child molester, but he had done a lot more damage and got like off by the court system and all that. So you kind of understand it. But in this case, what if the nurse or Lindsay had just said, I'm not going to be involved with this, and they go home and they end up getting attacked anyway? It's kind of like one of those things, you can run from the fight, but sometimes the fight comes to you. It just would have been more interesting because there's no contrast. You're right, because we spent a great deal of time in the hospital where this mob is getting riled up, and eventually the entire hospital goes after another escaped inmate and drives him to kill himself. And even that is just so tasteless when he's
way too much time with that.
Well, not only that, but his death scene, it's presented as another. I expected it to have been shot in 3D or something. It was like he's gonna jump out the window and we're gonna see him all the way down. And
the camera goes all the way down to them and splatter, and then we
see the contorted body. And isn't that so punk rock, man? I'm like, no, again, it's just cruel. It's an old man with mental problems getting the movie is too exploitive to make me believe, in all the other aspects, to make me believe that they're trying to make some kind of a statement or social responsibility message about how the mob can get out of control, because it's not painted as tragedy. It's just another gore effect.
I know the cops are outnumbered here, but you mean to tell me that after that guy jumped to his death because he had no other option, that no cop, no officer, not that black officer with the cowboy hat, nobody could handcuff Tommy Doyle and apprehend him for inciting a riot, inciting a mob, leading to that guy's death?
Tons of questions. Like, for example, the nurse we've already talked about, she dies because there's kind of a group of people in an SUV. They go out, they see kids playing in the park, when there's a murder on the loose, they try and warn them. But this park, if you look at the geography, because we spend a lot of time here and there's people like running away, it's in a neighborhood. There's houses with the lights on. It's not like there's an abandoned like park in the middle of nowhere. Where is everybody? Are they all in the middle of town? How big is Haddonfield?
And it is Halloween night, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So people are out. You think not every police officer would be at Haddonfield Community Hospital. Maybe they are, I don't know. But usually there's cops out patrolling, making sure kids are safe and everything. But yeah, this park is lit, it is night, but it is lit. And yet there's plenty of time for Michael to do his art installation here.
Yeah, they're like prosing the bodies on the merry-go-round,
and then hanging up the nurse. It reminded me of that scene in Silence of the Lambs when I think you know which one I'm going to talk about. But
in the prison.
Yeah, how does he have time to hang up this guy? There's no hoist or pulleys, not even time, but strength.
He's a genius. But no, again, that is just so that they can get their call back to Halloween 3 with the different masks, the trio of silver shamrock masks. It's just so, because you're right, there is a story here that it's like they tried to take it seriously, but they also tried to mix it up with a movie that people who go to see these kinds of movies won't ultimately
quality kills out.
Did you know, David, that Evil Dies Tonight?
There's going to be t-shirts. I think there are t-shirts like that says that.
Here's the thing.
But that's fake news.
Make this if you want to do something about Michael Myers and Halloween and him transcending, at least have the courtesy to introduce a supernatural element where this town is coming under this spell. Because that whole phrase, Evil Dies Tonight, multiple people say that in different parts of the movie, in different locations. So it's not like a catchphrase that catches on. Yeah, it takes hold in the hospital. But there's people like earlier in the movie saying that apropos of nothing. I'm like, what is with this catchphrase?
I mean, if you're going to make that point, then show that this is going viral all over the town with like massive text or something or whatever. I'm not saying that, Tommy Doyle has, some type of a, he's not some kind of like tech savvy genius, but something, maybe his nephew or something. I don't know. But, how is this getting across the town like that? And if Tommy Doyle is doing this every year, getting together with his fellow survivors and getting drunk, commemorating, and even doing some kind of like I don't know if that was like a talent show or a stand-up thing or whatever, but he does this little monologue here in front of a bar, and you'd think that everybody would know who he is and what his story is. So it's like this again, I don't know.
And that's a good point, because there are two characters that we are introduced pretty early on. There are a couple. She's dressed like a nurse. He's dressed like a doctor.
And they were in the last movie, yeah.
Oh, were they?
Yeah, they were. I watched the last one recently, and they were neighbors of. They mentioned that later on in this one. They were neighbors of the house in the last movie. The house that Michael first visits on that street, where he just goes in the kitchen and bludgeons that and leaves the baby in the crib. He bludgeons the mom. They live right next to that house, and they're across the street from that little black kid who was being babysat. Okay,
but did they have like a real part, or did you just like see them?
You did see them. You did see them leave their house, and get in a car, and so obviously this movie shows us where they went.
Okay.
And yeah, other than that, if you hadn't have seen the movie recently, you wouldn't have remembered them.
Right. And that's because I had no memory of it all. But so they're essentially new characters in this movie. And you're right. They sit down at this bar. They happen to be at the table, like they're sitting right against the table. Like there's a little bit of an elevation there at the bar. Tommy Doyle and his survivors group, and they're like, hey, can you keep it down a little bit? And they're like, yeah, sorry buddy. And they're like, oh my god, I didn't realize it was you
guys.
Right. But it's like, again, to your point, if they live in this town, it's not like they're just driving through because they came to visit someone having a Haddonfield Halloween party. They live there. They know the local celebrities. This town is not big enough for people not to know who the hell Tommy Doyle and everybody is. Also, they decide to join the hunt. Now, I understand the fever of, let's go get this guy, but can't they just say to Tommy Doyle, where are you guys meeting up? We're going to go home and change into clothing that doesn't make us vulnerable and stupid when we're going out to chase a maniac.
And it's funny because they say that they are a doctor and a nurse, and they dressed up like he's a doctor and she's a nurse, but he dressed up like a nurse and she dressed up like, anyway, they dressed up like their profession. So I don't know. I have a hard time thinking I'm a doctor and my wife's a nurse. We're going to go on a hunting spree for this legendary killer
to kill someone.
We're going to join in. Yeah. It's like, what?
Again, going back to this idea, and it's something you could have explored if you really wanted to bring the supernatural element. Would have been cool if there was something about Michael Myers that sort of infected the town and drove people crazy. The only thing I could think of, or I kept thinking about in this movie, was that wonderful Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, which is, for people who haven't seen it, A, go out and watch it, but B, it's these, this regular suburban town on this Maple Street, and weird things start happening. And it's sort of like a metaphor for communism. My god, the baker's house, their lights are going off and on. I thought there was no electricity on this block. They must be in league with the monsters. It turns out it was a giant alien experiment to see how crappy people can be. But I kept thinking about that during this movie and wishing that this almost 2-hour film was as smart as that 23 minutes of television.
I agree. You mentioned this briefly, but I didn't mind too much I thought it was kind of creative the way they went back, not so much whatever they did with Donald Pleasance as Loomis, but they focus on some of the younger officers back in 1978 when they went to the Myers house. And it was also it was kind of like almost this Rashomon effect where it's like, we're going to look at it from these guys' point of view. And if you watch the original movie, like all of this happens like really quick. All we really do is just kind of like follow Loomis to the home, and that's about it, And so we never really saw like police entering the house or whatever. So here we kind of follow up with, it's kind of basically a flashback from the perspective of Will Patton's Officer Hawkins, who was gravely injured from the real antagonist of the last movie, and he's hospitalized conveniently next to Laurie Strode in the hospital, and I kind of like that flashback. And young Hawkins is played by Thomas Mann, who I really like as an actor, and I think he did a good job. And you even have Jim Cummings as his partner. It was really interesting to see. But this whole dynamic that he feels guilty for a mishap, an accident that happened there, having to do with Michael Myers and everything. But it was a nice touch to kind of also play on this whole idea of how we remember things, how we cover things up, guilt, and all that. But again, I don't feel like it was really explored very well. I guess it was probably, in that sense, the whole Hawkins story, I think, was explored probably better than anything else in the movie. Probably because we had that flashback with the younger Hawkins and everything.
Yeah, I don't have the problem with the idea of doing that. It's just that where it ended up was just so cliche. It's the older officer saying, here, take this gun, kid, and it was an accident and all this other stuff.
Right.
And it's the cops cover up for each other because they're all corrupt and they're inept. I don't know what that's doing in a Halloween movie.
Well, I think in this case, I don't think it was necessarily, corrupt cops or anything. I think it was more so like, I'm trying to protect you. I could see you're totally rattled. It was a slightly older cop, really kind of trying to protect and take care of this rookie who was totally shell-shocked at what just happened. So not really any corruption there, but
no, yeah. It is a corruption of the law, because their procedure would say if that had happened, you don't, switch out the gun and all that stuff.
Right.
I mean, it's a noble purpose, but it is an example of, we see this all the time, cops covering up for each other. And that's, people have a big problem with that.
Right.
So again, it's fine. But my biggest issue, and I have not watched John Carpenter's Halloween in a while, but I guess Michael Myers went different places in the town. I don't know how this lines up with the end of that movie, because we see, Laurie Strode or Donald Pleasance busts into the bedroom, shoots Michael Myers. He falls out the window, and there's that famous shot of like he goes and looks over the edge, and he's not gone. There, right? Yeah. And that's how the movie ends. This picks up with Michael Myers just like walking around the town. Is that after that happened? I assume
it.
Because he goes back to his house.
He goes back to his house, and then, yeah, I guess so. He goes back to his house, and then he is apparently apprehended right in front by all these police. So how is he apprehended there? And
at the end of the movie,
yeah.
Well, because he hadn't killed as many people. He hadn't transcended at that point.
Yeah, he spent all this time in a hospital prison transcending into a superhuman.
So yeah, for folks who don't know, I don't know why you're watching this if you haven't seen Halloween Kills, but yeah, so Michael Myers gets essentially Rodney King'd on the front lawn of his house, and then I guess locked up. It's just kind of jarring because I can't get the fact that there was a Halloween 2 which picked up the same night as the continuation of Halloween 1 from 78.
Yeah.
So I have to kind of erase that whole idea of like, well, that's not what happened next. It is, because they're retconning it.
Yeah.
I took like 6 pages of notes, and
let's get into those.
No, I really don't want to.
We haven't even talked about Judy Greer yet. But.
We'll get to her in a second. But I did like the older couple that I mentioned.
Oh man.
The Lenny Clark, the comedian, is the guy, and he says, "There's a big fella in our bathroom, and he's wearing a monster mask." What? I don't know. That didn't sound. I don't know what dialogue that is. I also liked Michael McDonald, the great comic actor.
I was gonna say, not the singer.
No.
Okay.
He was on Mad TV. He played Stewart, and he's been in a bunch. Do you remember the first Austin Powers movie?
Oh yeah.
He was the guy who got run over by the slow moving steamroller.
Oh, that's awesome. That's right. Was he one of the guys who now live in the Myers house?
Yeah,
No,
he was the guy with this kind of silver hair, and he was dressed up as was it a cowboy? I don't remember what he was
something.
dressed.
A pirate, I think.
Pirate, that's what it was.
Oh, that's where I recognized him from. That's right.
And I
want a subplot side story with just those two characters. Like the way they renovated the interior of Myers' house, it's like so great.
I love that too. And that's the thing, is like, you're right. They could have a whole TV series about, like, because it's not like they, in most of these horror movies, there's people move into a house and then they find out that it was like haunted or whatever.
These guys embraced it.
Yeah, they were like, oh, we're gonna get this place for a steal. We're gonna make it look fabulous. It's gonna be great. But then again, they also realize, because of the mentality of the movie, like, why would they be creeped out there? It was a murder had happened there
40 years ago.
Older than that, because
it was 63, I think.
Yeah. So it was like 50 years or whatever. Right. It's like, that's old business. And they probably got rid of they tore everything out that was original of the house anyway, I bet. But no, that couple I liked, because, they're a gay couple. There's very little that's like stereotypical about them. They're just treated as like a regular couple. And I thought was kind of a nice dynamic that they had. They go out and they get messed with by some trick-or-treaters. Yeah, Little John, Big John. But they get messed with by some trick-or-treaters. They kind of mess back, and they're just hanging out, having fun on Halloween. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, what happens to them is so sick and distasteful, to the point where, up in their bedroom, they have this lovely little framed black and white photo of, one is kind of like laying the other guy's lap, looks like they're in a field or something. It's a very loving picture. Michael Myers, in his art installation, he takes their stabbed through, eyes gouged out, like mutilated bodies, and sets them up in that exact pose, except he reverses the bodies, whose head's in whose lap. I'm like, what?
Who's that
what
for?
Is this? Yeah, because they say he's got the
for whoever's following me.
Seriously, on Instagram.
It's like he's a YouTube influencer.
That's where the series is going next. But no, like, someone says he's got the mind of a 6-year-old, but the spirit of an animal or something like that. So he's like, he's not well developed, but he's also crazy.
Again, Hawkins says that. Based on what? You don't have 5 movies, 8 movies to go back on. All you know is that this guy escaped from prison recently, and you don't know anything like really about him except what happened 40 years ago.
Yeah, it's a big mess. And the fact that let's talk briefly about we'll talk about Judy Greer in a sec, but I want to talk about the advertising for this movie.
Wow. Okay.
I've seen, I think, every trailer for this, unless they put one out in like the last week, and they're all centered on Judy Greer, Jamie Lee Curtis going up against Michael Myers, and then like the daughter, Alice. I don't know who plays her, but it's all like, it ends tonight and all this other stuff. They're barely.
You'll have to wait till the next movie.
I guess, like, Anthony Michael Hall, spoiler alert, is like the main, like one of the main characters in this movie, and you see him for like a half a second in one of the trailers.
Yeah.
Not even actually the scene in the trailer that he's in isn't even in the movie, because it looks like he's talking to Laurie Strode saying, "What do we do?"
Yeah. I don't know if I know he does have a conversation with her, an encounter with her in the hospital, but I don't think he says anything like that.
I think that's mostly during like the melee, when things are starting to get out of control. Right.
Yeah, I just don't know. The way this is advertised, I mean, it's obviously just for, fans of either the last one or just fans of the franchise. I'm sure that people who like the last one will probably like this. I guess. I just think there's like a whole lot of missed opportunity. I will say this about Judy Greer's portrayal of Karen. She's playing a Karen. Terrible.
But she's not really. She's like the anti-Karen.
It's kind of great. She is much better in this movie than she was in the last movie, and that's mainly because she's given a lot more to do.
Yeah.
And what I appreciate about her, the way she's written and the way she's portrayed in this one, is again, I felt a lot of authenticity here. It felt very real the way she was responding. And there's just like moments in the hospital where she's just totally like realizing and coming down, from the adrenaline, and realizing like what has happened, and she has her own trauma, as we kind of got an indication of from the last movie, of the way she was raised, and the way Laurie raised her to be prepared for any situation, for him coming back, blah blah blah. And she tried to move on from that, but obviously this came back to haunt her. But now her husband's dead, and as far as she knows, her daughter is somewhere, and she learns that her daughter grouped up with Tommy to go after this, to hook up with the mob and go after Michael. Yet she needs to be there for her mother. So there is this kind of, she's like in between generations of traumatized women, and the dynamic is really interesting between the three of them. Because really the granddaughter really has kind of like an appreciation for the grandmother we established in the last movie, yet she is kind of very much estranged and removed from the trauma. So the granddaughter is understandably the least traumatized out of the three of them. So I guess to a certain extent you could understand why she wants to just like end tonight. Out of anybody, I could see her saying, maybe, this ends tonight, just because, her father just died, and she thought this was all a bunch of malarkey, and just a bunch of urban legends, and now it's really affecting her, the way it affected, somewhat in the way it affected her grandmother. So it's all coming to this, truthful realization for her. But I did think that there was a lot more that Greer was given to do here. I just think it's really kind of unfortunate the way it ended for her. Jeez.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Because I agree. I liked her in this movie. She was one of the few bright spots. But at the end of the film, Michael is in the house that he grew up, or his childhood home. He's killed the occupants that we've already talked about. Lonnie, the former bully, and his son and Allison go up to the house. Right. The dad is like, don't come in after me or whatever. I'm going to take care of this. Of course, they hear gunshots. The two kids run in after them. They encounter Michael Myers. The Cameron, the son, gets what is this fixation? I understand, like I'm just more of an old school guy, I guess, like the Friday the 13th kills. They were creative, but they were quick. Right. There wasn't like Jason Voorhees standing over people as they're like begging for their lives and choking on their own blood for like minutes on end. And like, I get it, move on. This is horrible. But I guess I'm just an old fogey, and I love horror movies, but this is just something really nasty, and it's not entertaining is what I'm saying.
Right.
But, so there's the confrontation at the house. Allison is the last person standing. Mom comes up from behind, with a pitchfork and stabs Michael in the back. And then he turns around and she's got the mask and she runs. And at first, I asked the question that I had asked several other times in this movie. There are wide open streets all over this town.
Where is everybody?
No, not even that. Why are you running through yards and parks and stuff? Go to the main street and head north or whatever.
Yeah.
But it turns out it's a trap because the rest of the town is waiting to beat the crap out of Michael Myers, and they do. And it's kind of a nice little, as nice as this movie can get, scene. Judy Greer is standing off to the side, kind of like glad that someone is taking care of this because evil has to end tonight, but also mortified that the people that she's in this town with are that this is inside of them, that they can just like kill, like men, women. I don't think there were any children, thank God, but just mutilating this Michael Myers. They cut to her and her daughter being like taken care of, like the trauma blanket, and there's like lights and EMTs and stuff.
And where were they?
I don't know, but more importantly, when were they? Because we cut back to Michael Myers laying on the ground and everybody's still around them as if they had just finished kicking the crap out of him. And he gets up and he starts like spectacularly murdering people.
Yeah.
Like he got his mojo back while everyone thought he was dead.
Like power up.
Right.
Achievement unlocked.
Yes. But that's the point. Like, I don't know where this was in relation to the Myers house. It looked like they ran a couple of blocks or something, but still, that house, the Myers house, the old Myers house, there's EMTs, there's all these people around it. There's like an investigation going on, yet Karen gets to go upstairs. I can kind of understand that because she's there with her daughter, right?
Right.
How the hell did Michael Myers get inside the house? Like, police set up a perimeter around the building when there's an active crime scene, unless killing all those people allowed him to transcend, and now he truly is the shape. And I don't understand the rules to this thing.
There are none.
Well, in the 78 version, Donald Pleasance's character had a theory about Michael Myers, that he was the embodiment of evil.
Sure.
And the fact that he kept popping up places, that allowed the audience to speculate, well, is he just really good at, popping up places, or is there something more to him? And over the years in the sequels, he became the shape, and he could just be Jason Voorhees and teleport everywhere. But that hasn't been established really in this movie. It's people speculating, but the evidence of what we see in Michael Myers, it doesn't add up.
Yeah, it doesn't add up. And the really, obviously by now, if you haven't but with Greer's character dying at the end, all that really served to do is give her mother fuel for revenge for the next final showdown in the next movie. And that's it. It's like, really?
Yeah, I mean, I'm there with you. And Allison, I guess, is still alive, assuming she's not in a hospital for the entire third film.
Right.
But it's like, this does not work as a trilogy. It's kind of like we were talking about with, James Bond a little bit ago. These things work much better as kind of standalones. You can have references to other things, but when you're trying to, it's kind of, or more like Peter Jackson's The Hobbit. You take this really thin story and you stretch it out over 9 hours of movies. It's like,
that's what they're trying to do here.
Right. I'm done after this movie. I'll probably see Halloween Dies. I think it's supposed to be called.
Ends.
Just out of curiosity.
I think it's
Halloween Ends.
But is that a promise or a question mark?
It'll be a miracle unless it's already in the can, because this thing is out on, it's out on Peacock. It's opening up in theaters, but I can't see there being any thirst for more of this continuity out there.
I think it might have already been filmed. I thought that they filmed like all three of them.
All right.
Like back to back, but
so yeah, that
would make sense, but
it'll be an obligatory thing. It'll come out in a couple of years or maybe next year if they want to just kind of rush it out. But
unless it's supposed to come out next year.
Unless it's some kind of a spectacular, oh my God, I didn't see that coming, twist story-wise. It's like they've kind of ruined it in that, is he going to do the Halloween thing where he's going around stalking people in the houses and killing them creatively, because the whole town is on high alert at this point, unless he goes to like the next town over where people haven't caught wind of what's happening. Is it just going to be a showdown with him and Sarah Connor Strode? Because that sounds really boring to me.
And at this point, like, I understand there's one line where it says like, we've reached out to whatever, the other county or the other town, and nobody's coming to help us, basically. And I'm like, okay, fine. But like, if a hospital's in crisis, and especially after an escapee, we'll get to that in a minute, an escapee jumped his death, you mean that nobody else is coming? Like, as far as authorities, anything, like, that has to be addressed in the next movie. And the other thing,
you can call the feds. I mean, if nothing else.
Right. I mean, I don't know, weekend warriors. The other thing too is like, how many times we've seen in not just the Halloween movies, but slasher movies or whatever, where some type of escapee truck from, or escapees from, with in a hospital truck from a prison or a hospital prison, whatever, escape, wander around, the vehicles on the side of the road. There's never like anybody trying to like corral them or, go after them. There's no authorities saying, hey, we need to, retrieve these patients, or whatever. It's like, he's escaped. Oh no. And then you just have these, that's what happened to that poor guy who jumped to his death, is just, he's this kind of like crazy guy in a gown. And so anybody just thinks, well, we've never seen him unmasked. Well, come on. He's not this short, frumpy guy who looks like Larry Storch.
Who's still wearing his like gown from the mental institution. You know, when Michael Myers is like running away from people, you know,
he's not wearing a gown.
Right. The one highlight of that whole hospital scene, I thought, actually, I know one of the extras who was in the movie, and I heard that he was in the movie, and I actually got to see him twice on screen.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This guy, Corey.
In the hospital.
Yeah. It was like, because usually when you hear about that, like, oh, I was in this crowd scene, it's like, yeah, you're gonna be spec number 16 out of 3,000. Yeah. Right. But he was right there. Okay.
More notes.
Where did Allison? Okay, I understand Allison puts the knife in Lori, like wraps it up in Lori's t-shirt and puts it in by her hospital bed.
Yeah.
Right. Why does she still have that knife? If she'd been questioned by the police and all of this other stuff after action, they would have, you know, they would have checked, I'm sure, her things to make sure.
Yeah, I mean, we've established that the police procedure in this town is just awful. And it was awful back in 78, and it remains awful.
Yeah. I don't know if I can't tell if the filmmakers are trying to make a statement or if they just don't care, but I feel like the filmmakers care. They're just not very good at what they're trying to do.
I think they're trying to tell us something, especially when we go back to that scene in the hospital stairs with the sheriff guy, and he's just like, wah, wah, wah. You know, he's just sitting there like, well, how did that escalated quickly.
That, and also I did like the a couple of things with this hospital, like a couple of orderlies got like knocked down the stairs, like a comedic tumble. And then at one point when there's the mob coming up the stairwell,
the doctor pushes him. Pushes her, Karen.
Yes, but I'm talking about another scene where it's just the mob kind of like coming up and rounding a corner. There's this one guy who's like, he's like clapping and like barking like a seal. I'm like, what? What
are you doing? What are you doing?
I don't know.
Yeah, I was expecting like, I don't know, like the theme from Benny Hill is like something. It's just like, what?
Someone since on Peacock, someone grabbed this movie and put the Benny Hill music in during all the hospital stuff.
Sure. I mean, I understand what they were trying to get at and say. It's like, you can, you know, as it heavy-handedly said, it's like, we've become these monsters, you know. A mob can get out of control, as we know. But even like their plan, when Karen grabbed the mask and led Michael to this other street, through a yard, this other street, their plan was horrible. What, just surround him? I'm like, you don't want to get in close contact with this guy. You know, it's like,
no. And you know, that's the thing, is like, if like the people bring out guns and they're like shooting at him and stuff, like everybody hits Michael Myers, no one like misses and hits the guy standing behind him or anything. They're all expert marksmen somehow. But my thought is, if there is this really idea that he's the boogeyman, someone should bring like an electrical saw, so when he's down on the ground ostensibly dead, cut off his head
off,
or cut off his legs. I don't know.
I thought about this. I'm like, in all, you know, I don't have a vivid memory of all of these Halloween movies, but in any of them, has anybody ever tried to chop off his head?
They did at the end of one of the Halloween movies. It might have been H2O, but it turned out, because I wanted to make more of him, it was like, this is the death of Michael Myers.
The wrong person, right?
It was the ambulance driver. Michael had like cut his throat or something, and then put his mask on it. So that
I do remember that. Yeah.
Anyway, let's finish this up. We've been talking about Halloween kills for a long time. I'm ready to kill this conversation.
We've killed it. Again, there's probably going to be people who like this. I liked it slightly less than the last one, but the bar was low.
I liked it slightly more, but that's just because there was enough nonsense.
I meant more.
Okay. Yeah. Freudian slip. No, but yeah, thank you, David Fowley, of keeping it real. It was fun talking about this movie more than it was to watch it, and I appreciate you being my wingman. And next time we're going to be talking about something coarse and sandy.
Happens.
Yeah. We're gonna be talking about Dune, I think, next. No, well, we're gonna be talking about Dune after the screening, but not like on the mic.
Sure.
Yeah. I keep forgetting. I feel like I talked to you about everything, but yeah. Anyhow, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you very much. Happy early Halloween. This movie is definitely a trick and not so much of a treat.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to the original.
Definitely. All right. Take care, man.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.